The world watched in disbelief as the skies above Israel and Iran lit up with missile fire. Last night, sirens blared across Tel Aviv and Haifa, with the Iron Dome desperately intercepting a flurry of incoming projectiles. Dr. Farid, can you paint a picture of what unfolded on the ground?
Absolutely. Imagine the chaos. Missiles screamed through the night sky, some slipping past air defenses, setting entire city blocks ablaze. In Haifa, a direct strike on the port sent fire tearing through parked cars and buildings, forcing paramedics and fire crews to rescue the injured from smoldering debris. The psychological toll is enormous. Residents huddled in shelters, unsure if the next explosion would be their last.
The sense of fear seems pervasive, yet life goes on. We heard reports of trains still running and residents trying to maintain routines. What does that say about civilian resilience in the face of war?
It's almost surreal. One witness described boarding a train moments after explosions, with the station announcer calmly giving departure times. This speaks to a collective defiance. People refuse to let terror dictate their daily lives. Yet, beneath the surface, anxiety simmers. Families are split between staying put and seeking refuge elsewhere.
Despite Israel's famed Iron Dome, over 270 Iranian missiles have been launched since Friday, with 22 reportedly breaching the defenses. Can you explain how these systems work and why they sometimes fail?
Iron Dome is a marvel using radar to detect threats and launching interceptors precisely. But no system is infallible, especially against saturation attacks. When dozens of missiles are fired simultaneously, the system can be overwhelmed, as even its multi-layered defenses have finite resources. Statistically, Iron Dome intercepts about 90% of threats, but those that get through can still cause devastating harm.
We've seen similar challenges globally. For example, during the Gulf War, Patriot missiles struggled with Scuds. Does this vulnerability change military or political calculations for Israel?
Definitely. The psychological reassurance of near invulnerability is shattered each time a missile hits. It pressures leaders to escalate offensives to deter further attacks, but also compels investments in next-gen countermeasures like laser systems or AI-driven threat prioritization.
Each volley seems to spark a fiercer response. Iran's latest missile barrage came after Israeli airstrikes on Iranian soil, reportedly damaging missile sites near Isfahan and Shiraz. What's driving this tit-for-tat escalation?
It's a classic security dilemma. Each side views its strikes as preemptive or retaliatory, justifying further escalation. Israel aims to cripple Iran's missile and nuclear infrastructure, while Iran seeks to inflict symbolic and strategic pain, showing it can strike deep into Israeli territory. Neither wants to appear weak domestically or internationally, so restraint is hard to come by.
Are there historical precedents for this pattern? And what are the risks if it continues unchecked?
Certainly, the 2006 Lebanon War began with limited exchanges and spiraled rapidly. Escalation without diplomatic guardrails risks regional war, drawing in proxies and even global powers. The longer tit-for-tat continues, the higher the chance of miscalculation or catastrophic strikes.
Civilians have borne the brunt of this conflict. Over 220 killed in Iran, nearly 20 in Israel, hundreds wounded. There are also reports of strikes on residential areas and critical infrastructure. How are these attacks shaping public sentiment and international opinion?
Images of children pulled from rubble and cities ablaze have galvanized both populations. In Iran, even those previously critical of the government now rally in patriotic solidarity, while in Israel, fear of indiscriminate missile strikes fuels calls for decisive military action. Internationally, such scenes prompt outrage and urgent calls for restraint, but also polarize global opinion along pre-existing alliances.
Does targeting civilian areas serve a strategic purpose, or is it a tragic byproduct of urban warfare?
While both sides claim to avoid civilian targets, urban density makes collateral damage almost inevitable. Sometimes, civilian sites are deliberately targeted for psychological impact or to undermine morale. Each side accuses the other of war crimes, weaponizing public outrage as part of their information campaigns.
One of the most striking developments was the Iranian missile attack on Israel's Weizmann Institute of Science. For listeners unfamiliar, why would a research institution become a strategic target?
The Weizmann Institute isn't just an academic hub, it's a linchpin for Israel's scientific and defense innovation. Its research supports everything from AI-driven military guidance systems to secure communications and drone technology. By striking it, Iran aimed to undermine Israel's technological edge and send a message: nowhere is off limits.
What's the potential impact, both practical and symbolic, of such an attack?
Practically, disrupting research may slow defense projects. Symbolically, it shakes public confidence in security and projects' Iranian reach. It's akin to targeting MIT or DARPA in the US meant to demoralize and disrupt at the same time.
This war has reignited global anxieties about nuclear proliferation. Israel maintains strategic ambiguity about its arsenal, while Iran's enrichment program is accelerating. How real is the nuclear threat in this conflict?
The threat is more psychological than imminent, but it's potent. Israel's ambiguous posture deters overt attacks, while Iran's nuclear advances enriching uranium up to 60% raise alarms about weaponization. Recent reports estimate over 12 zero-nuclear warheads worldwide, with 100 on high alert. A miscalculation could spark a chain of escalations nobody can control.
Some experts claim Iran doesn't actually want a bomb, citing U.S. intelligence. Others argue the enrichment is suspicious. Where does the truth lie?
Intentions are murky. Officially, Iran denies seeking nuclear weapons, pointing to religious edicts and public statements. Yet the scale and secrecy of their program, and past deception, fuel deep mistrust in Israel and the West. That distrust is the driving force behind preemptive military actions.
Iran's leaders say they'll return to talks only when the bombing stops, while Israel insists on security guarantees before standing down. With mediators like Qatar and Oman sidelined, is there any realistic path back to the negotiating table?
Right now, prospects are bleak. Both sides see negotiation as weakness in the midst of violence. Moreover, Israel wants any new deal to address Iran's missile program, not just nuclear issue a red line for Tehran. Previous rounds of diplomacy, like the 2015 JCPOA, took years of painstaking trust building. In this climate, trust is in short supply.
Could third parties like the U.S., Russia, or the G7 play a meaningful role in de-escalation?
Potentially, but only if they exert unified pressure. The U.S. has the greatest leverage over Israel, while Russia holds sway in Tehran. The G7 can issue statements, but without concrete incentives or guarantees, their influence is more symbolic than substantive.
The G7 summit in Canada is unfolding as the conflict rages. Leaders are scrambling to respond, but can this forum realistically shape events on the ground?
The G7 is a stage for consensus building, but not direct intervention. Statements urging de-escalation or humanitarian aid can set global norms, but Iran and Israel are primarily influenced by their own calculations and, to a lesser extent, US or Russian policy. A coordinated G7 economic or diplomatic response could, however, increase costs for further escalation.
Are there scenarios where the G7's response could tip the balance, say, through sanctions or mediation?
If the G7 imposed synchronized sanctions or offered a viable diplomatic off-ramp with security guarantees, it might change incentives. But with diverging interests, particularly on energy and regional alliances, such unity is difficult to achieve.
Beyond Israel and Iran, there's growing risk of spillover. Iraqi paramilitaries have threatened U.S. troops, and regional actors like Hezbollah are on alert. How likely is it that this conflict draws in the broader Middle East or even superpowers?
The threat is substantial. The region is a tinderbox, multiple proxy groups, overlapping alliances, and historic grievances. If Iran strikes U.S. assets, or if Israeli actions inadvertently kill foreign nationals, a limited war could escalate rapidly. Think of the 1914 domino effect, localized violence sparking global catastrophe. For now, deterrence holds, but it's precarious.
What's the worst-case scenario if escalation continues unchecked?
A regional war involving Israel, Iran, U.S. forces, and proxies like Hezbollah or Iraqi militias. This could disrupt global energy supplies, trigger refugee crises, and even raise the specter of limited nuclear use, a nightmare for international stability.
Amid the chaos, thousands of foreign nationals, including Indian students, are being evacuated from Iran. What does this reveal about the humanitarian crisis, and how do countries coordinate such complex operations?
Evacuations are logistical feats requiring coordination between embassies, host nations, and sometimes adversaries. India has a record of mass evacuations from Ukraine to Afghanistan. In this case, Iran's foreign ministry authorized safe passage for Indian students to Armenia. Such cooperation, even in war, underscores the universality of humanitarian needs regardless of politics.
How do these crises affect the diaspora and regional stability?
Diaspora communities face trauma and uncertainty, often becoming political pawns. Large-scale displacement strains resources and can destabilize host regions, amplifying the ripple effects of war far beyond the battlefield.
As missiles still streak across the sky, what scenarios do you foresee for the coming weeks? Is a ceasefire plausible, or will the conflict grind on?
Absent a dramatic shift, I expect continued escalation punctuated by brief lulls. Ceasefire is possible only if both sides conclude that further violence brings diminishing returns and greater risk. Alternatively, a major miscalculation could trigger broader confrontation. Ultimately, external mediators may broker an uneasy truce, but deep-seated mistrust will linger, setting the stage for future crises.
For our listeners, what's the key takeaway amid the fog of war?
Beyond the headlines, remember the human stories behind each statistic. These are families uprooted, scientists and students at risk, and entire societies grappling with uncertainty. The choices made in the coming days will shape not just the Middle East, but the security architecture of the world for years to come.